Everyone, our first question today is, will the missile base on the moon fail? And you could say, wait a minute, there is no missile base on the moon. No, not yet. Quietly, several nations are eagerly planning to land rocket launching equipment on the surface of the moon. If you're not aware of that, you could study up on it, but that's what's happening. Most people are not focused on the space race between America on the one hand and China on the other. Those who study China's activities realize that China's main goal is to be the dominant, wait for it, superpower and eventually rule all planet Earth, which they could do if they had a missile base on the moon. God has already written what happens to China in the book of Daniel. Most people do not have faith that what God has written will be the coming events for our future. When God says China will be destroyed, we can be sure that by the power of God it will happen. Most people don't trust there is a God, or that God's word in the Bible is actually going to happen, or that that's what that means when they read that scripture in the Bible. God knows what will happen in future days and uses Daniel 11:44 to show us that China fails at becoming the dominant world power. Now, back some years, it looked like in 2018, the Chinese were right on course to become the world superpower. And things changed, right? Then COVID came and all kinds of things happened. Okay, now they're working again to become the dominant world power. Question, which nations are eager to land equipment on the surface of the moon? Can you answer that question? All right, the answer is 5 nations. Wow, 5 nations are currently working towards landing their equipment on the moon. India now has an operational moon rover vehicle on the surface of the moon, driving around, looking for things, digging up stuff, whatever. Israel sent a landing craft to the moon, but sadly, it crashed into the moon before achieving a soft landing. Russia, China, and America, that makes a total now of 5, right, have all taken rock samples from the surface of the moon. They've had their little rovers up there, they've been digging in the dirt in the moon. They've taken rock samples from the moon's surface and shipped them, mailed them, used rockets to bring them back to planet Earth for scientific evaluations. Now, NASA, the American Space Agency, has announced back in 2023 that they expect China will be the next to have men walking on the moon. China, they're ahead of us. That's what NASA is thinking. America wants to be the first to establish a rocket launching capability on the moon. The American goal is to create a rocket base or a missile base to launch astronauts off the face of the moon towards planet Mars and land them on planet Mars. That's the American plan. Elon Musk, a space technology genius who has had great success so far in launching many and much equipment into space. It's like every time you turn around, there's another news report. Elon Musk just launched a whole bunch more satellites up into space. Well, he pictures humans living on not one planet in the solar system, but on 2 planets in the near future, meaning Earth and Mars. Yes, he envisions humans inhabiting the planet Mars. You can go if you want. I sure don't want to go. I like it down here where the oxygen is free and it's supplied all day long every day, and I don't have to worry. I just keep breathing it, right? Up on Mars, you're going to have your own oxygen supply, or your air. The surface of the moon is an ideal place for a rocket launching platform for several reasons. Most people don't think about it. It's been mentioned in the news. The gravity on the moon is only 1/6 of that on planet Earth. A smaller gravitational pull on the moon reduces the force required to blast a rocket into space, and hence saving large amounts of rocket fuel and effort and other things. Other moon launch benefits come from the vacuum of space surrounding the moon. There is no air surrounding the moon. Those who know a little bit about the moon, they already know that. People who think it's still green cheese, they're probably not aware of that. On Earth, a rocket launch fights, you've seen them on TV surely, right? Fights to overcome air resistance as well as the pull of gravity. A rocket fired from the moon does not need to overcome air resistance because there is no air around the moon. So again, the second point, so much easier to launch a rocket off the moon. In the past, American space shuttles, remember the days? You can look it up in Google if you want. Space shuttles have traveled at 17,000 miles an hour. I traveled one time at 135 miles an hour on the back of a motorcycle. That was scary. I wasn't driving, somebody else was, right? But 17,000 miles an hour is the speed at which the shuttles approached planet Earth, or the air canopy around the Earth, right? And then they had to carefully come in through the atmosphere, and I think they heat up the front end of the shuttle to like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, right? It's pretty tricky stuff. At those speeds, the air friction, which doesn't bother us too much, riding around down here on planet Earth, the air friction created extreme heat on the outer surface of each shuttle. So shuttles were built with a heat-resisting tiles to shield or to protect the inner part of the space shuttle from disastrous extreme heat. If the heat shield failed, which it did in one case, the space shuttle would be destroyed by the extreme heat of re-entry into the air around planet Earth. Spacecraft approaching and leaving the moon's surface, right? We don't think of this too much, but coming back, right? Landing on the moon, there's no air friction. You can't be traveling 17,000 miles an hour when you get to the moon. You've got to slow down, right? But there's no air friction, right? And therefore, no heat shields required. Question: how well is China doing in the space race? In 2022, China deployed, 2022, what's that, a year and a half ago, China deployed their own space station, their own Chinese-owned, controlled, regulated space station in orbit, notice, 280 miles above planet Earth, a very important strategic amount of miles. China landed their first moon rover in 2013. That was a long time ago. And a second moon rover in 2018. They are busy getting stuff on the moon. In 2020, China sent rocket samples from the moon back to Earth for evaluation. China has plans to build what they are calling a scientific research station on the moon, except they want to be the dominant world power. So how much science is there going to be versus how much military is there going to be? And so they want to do that. They announced it in 2023, and they announced their plans to land the first two Chinese astronauts on the moon by the year, wait for it, not immediately, but by the year 2030. Oh, well, that's at least 6 years from now. But that's their plan. Now, what are they going to do with those 2 astronauts on the surface? They're going to start building a colony, and they're going to start building a missile base to launch missiles. Do you think they want to go to Mars? No, they want to control planet Earth. China is already using spacecraft for military purposes. You can Google it, you can, if you listen closely, they have equipment to shoot down our satellites, our GPS satellites, right, and other things, and all kinds of space technology, which we are now rapidly catching up to because now we have a Space Force military section in America. Most don't realize that the first nation to have missile launching capabilities on the moon would be able to rule all of planet Earth, right? And why do I say that? Well, when America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, Japan didn't know there wasn't a 3rd one and a 4th one and a 5th one, right? So they saw the devastation of the first one, and they decided that they wouldn't surrender. And then a 2nd one was dropped, and they thought it through, not knowing that there wouldn't be a 3rd one and a 4th one, and they decided to surrender. Okay, and that was dropped from a bomber at like 29, 30,000 feet, right? With some danger to the plane, right? But imagine the moon like a massive, well-armed spaceship positioned perfectly to launch deadly rockets straight down, right? You wait till, New York City is coming up straight down, and you fire the rocket at 17,000 miles, or they go faster now, right? And it comes straight down. How do you stop a rocket missile coming into New York City being fired straight down from the surface of the moon? We don't have that technology, right? It's like a bullet fired at a bullet trying to hit a bullet, an incoming bullet. Currently, back on Earth, most warhead missiles are fired from a place on Earth or under the sea. On Earth, enemy missiles are launched and quickly detected by radar and other devices, then tracked for the likely target zone. This is happening over in Israel. They have the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome detects a missile launch or a rocket launch. It calculates, it's a high-speed computer, it calculates how fast the rocket's going, how high, what's the trajectory, where the rocket is likely to land. If it's going to land in Jerusalem, then another rocket from the Iron Dome system is fired up, it tracks with the original rocket, catches up to it, and detonates and explodes it in midair, and the rocket doesn't end up hitting Jerusalem. This is, if the missile is a serious threat, an anti-missile missile is launched in an attempt to blow it up in flight, and it works really well so long as not too many missiles are all fired at once. The anti-missile travels faster and explodes when it reaches the invading missile or rocket. Enemy rockets are flying all over the Middle East almost every hour of the day. And American ships are shooting them down, Israelis are shooting them down. I don't know if anybody else is shooting them down, but there's plenty of missiles incoming and plenty of missiles being shot down, and some get through and do damage. American warships are tracking and destroying many of them before they arrive at their targets. Question: what would happen if missiles were fired from the moon straight down to an enemy city? That would be tough going to defend against, right? How can an anti-missile missile leave planet Earth going up and destroy a missile coming straight down? We don't know how to do that, right? We have to sort of catch up to the missile that we want to destroy. This kind of attack would be far more difficult to prevent. So, those who learn to trust God and believe how God has written our future history need never worry that China will become a superpower ruling all the other nations by having a missile launch base on the moon. The Bible proof that China fails to rule all nations, which, a lot of people on TV are saying, good chance that China will rule all nations, right? And especially, they don't say this, especially if they can launch missiles from the moon. So Bible proof that China fails to rule all nations is given in Daniel chapter 11, Daniel towards the end of the Old Testament in your Bible, chapter 11, in 5 short verses. You don't have to study chapter after chapter after chapter. You don't have to study all 66 books of the Bible. You just need to look at 5 short verses in chapter 11 of Daniel. Verse 40 of Daniel 11 shows a superpower military with many ships that overwhelms the Arab countries in the end time period. Okay, it says it's the end time period. So how many nations have many ships? If you know anything about naval weaponry, you know that Russia, China, and America have large numbers of warships. America has the largest number of fleets or aircraft carriers and aircraft carrier fleets. If you're watching TV, you're seeing the Ford and other aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea, and they're busy shooting down things, right? Missiles that are incoming. So Daniel 11:40 says, I'm reading it now, at the time of the end, the king of the north, right? Back in the old days, that was a European power or a European-based power out of Greece, right? Shall enter the countries and overwhelm them and pass on or pass through or withdraw using many ships. At the end time, using many ships. So basically that boils down to 3 superpowers, Russia, China, and America, who have many ships in the end time. Britain used to have lots of ships, not so much anymore. End times means the period leading up to the coming of Jesus Christ. Verse 40 shows this superpower nation to have a mighty military capable of using many ships to enter and to overwhelm several Arab countries. When we look at verse 41, we see this same many ship superpower entering Israel. That has not happened yet. Right now, Israel is fighting Hamas in Gaza City and so on, and fighting on the northern border with Hezbollah, and fighting the Houthis who are shooting rockets in from Yemen, and fighting Iran, who's the master plotter behind everything, right? And so this superpower enters Israel. This is verse 41. Enters Israel. Now, why would he enter Israel? Because back in the days that Kuwait got invaded by Iraq, American troops entered Kuwait, not to capture Kuwait, but to drive the Iraqi army and weaponry out of Kuwait and give the Kuwaiti nation back to the Kuwaiti people. So to protect Kuwait from, they were already got invaded, so it was sort of uninvade, or to release them or make them free from the invading power. So this is verse 41. They'll be entering Israel. Why? Because if you launch too many missiles into tiny little Israel all at the same time, the Iron Dome fails. It can't keep up with hundreds and hundreds of incoming missiles. They've already tested that, and it doesn't work. And also, at the same time as entering Israel, this many-ship superpower overthrows many Arab nations. What? Well, there's a bunch of Arab nations that are out of control. Libya kind of got beat up back in the Reagan days, right? And Syria, if you remember, not so many years ago, Syria had its air force destroyed by American missiles. Back to Daniel 11:41, he shall enter the glorious land, Bible language for Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. Well, we're looking at that in the news today. The glorious land Israel is being attacked, not only from Gaza and Hamas, but also from Hezbollah in the north, and also from the Houthis down in Yemen. And I'm not sure whether Iran has launched anything yet, but they're the puppet master. The glorious land in Bible language stands for Israel. Question: who might the many countries that get overthrown, who might they be? Verse 42 shows that one of the Arab countries to be overthrown is Egypt, a major Arab country. Verse 42, he shall stretch out his hand against the countries and the land of Egypt. Okay, so we have a name, we know it's an Arab nation, we know where it is, shall not escape. We go on to verse 43, and it shows us that 3 of the many Arab nations to be captured and overthrown, all there in verse 43. It reads, he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, also the Libyans and the Ethiopians. So now we have 3 Arab nations named of the many that are going to be overthrown and captured: Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia. So we know what 3 of them are, but that's not many, that's just a few. A second thing we learn from verse 43 is that overthrown means totally captured. Now, how do we know that? Well, in World War II, Hitler invaded France, and all the precious things of France came under the powers of the German military. They were stealing famous paintings and hiding them in salt mines or silver mines or somewhere, right? They were hiding them and saving them, and when they captured all of Europe, Germany was going to be the number one, and they were going to have all the rich, good stuff. When Egypt gets captured in the near future, many ships, the many ship superpower, will have total control of Egypt's gold and silver and precious things, just like the Germans had total control over everything in France. They could steal it, they could take it, they could tell the French leaders to do whatever, and they had to do it because they could get shot. No one in the TV news media that you're watching today is expecting the current war between Israel, let's see, who's fighting this war? Israel and Hamas, Israel and Hezbollah, Israel and Yemen, Israel and Iran, American ships, of which there are many American ships near Israel, and they're fighting the Houthis and the attacks on the shipping lanes, and it's getting bigger and bigger by the week. Could it get so big that it would capture Egypt, Ethiopia, Libya, and many Arab nations? It could get that way if something huge and explosive happens to make the American military super angry. It happened in Pearl Harbor days, it can happen again. So no one in the TV news media is expecting this current war between Israel and Iran, really, and their proxies, right, to be the beginning of World War III. Every time somebody says World War III, they're suggesting that it's the nuclear war between Russia and America, or Russia and China and America. And that's what everybody's thinking when they say World War III could be here. They're thinking nuclear World War III. No, this Arab, many nations get captured, is World War III. Think of it. How many nations were involved in World War II? Just about all the nations on the planet. Even Australia sent troops to help fight the Germans. So the masses in most Arab nations are desperately wanting Israel to be pushed into the sea. The riots and the rallies in America often chant, from the river to the sea. That means start with the Jordan River and push all of the Jews and all of the Israelis out of the land of Israel into the Mediterranean Sea. That's what it means. It means totally destroy the Jews and Israel, thus freeing Palestine for the Palestinians. Those who are watching the Arab-Israeli war on TV know that a superpower military with many ships, America, is in the region shooting down rockets and drones and missiles on a daily basis. So what God wrote 2,500 years ago in the book of Daniel is in fact beginning to happen on a small basis. The superpower with many ships is there. The Israelis, or the glorious land Israel, is there. The Arabs nations, a handful of Arab nations. Egypt is not fighting as yet, but wait for it, Egypt will get involved. So now back to God's description of China being destroyed. Before we see China being destroyed in verse 44, so far we've read verse 40, 41, 42, and verse 43. There's 4 of the 6 verses. Then we come to verse 44. Before that, we need to focus on where the many-ship superpower is positioned when verse 44 happens. If you've got your Bible open, or you bring it up on your laptop or your cell phone, right? You see that the many ships, many Arab nations captured stops being talked about by the end of verse 43, and verse 44 is where the many-ship superpower gets attacked. Huge numbers of boots on the ground will be needed to capture and overthrow many Arab nations. Picture it. Try capturing and overthrowing one Arab nation. You're going to need any boots on the ground? Yeah, we've done that. We've tried that many times before, right? This is many Arab nations. We are talking major World War III activity. God tells us that the many ships military will eventually enter Israel. Hasn't happened yet. It will happen, to protect it and also capture many of the Arab nations that surround Israel. The blueprint is already there. It's just very small right now, but it's involving the many-ship superpower, Israel, and the Arab nations. When verse 44 does happen, the superpower army will already be inside Israel territory. They'll be in and around Jerusalem. So north of Jerusalem, if you look on a map, look in an atlas, whatever, right, is Moscow. Just Google Maps will show you. Find Jerusalem, go straight north, there's Moscow, Russia, right? And east of Jerusalem, go straight east of Jerusalem, China. So many ships' army gets attacked by an enemy nation north of Jerusalem, Moscow, Russia, as well as by a second enemy nation east of Jerusalem, China. Daniel 11:44 reads this way: but news from the east, remember, east of Jerusalem, China, and north of Jerusalem, Russia, troubled him, the many ships guy. Therefore he shall go out with great fury. What happens when a mighty military power goes out with great fury? Wait for it. To destroy and annihilate many. The two nations attack the many ships superpower, and he destroys and annihilates many. China gets destroyed. Final is, this verse does not say a second war begins between 3 superpowers. It says the many ships friend of Israel destroys and annihilates the 2 enemy attackers, the 2 superpowers, Russia and China. Question: what is God saying in this verse? He tells us that China never achieves world dominance. They are annihilated and destroyed before they have time to land 2 astronauts on the moon, set up a missile base, and have total control over planet Earth from a missile base on the moon, because World War III comes first and they lose right at the end of World War III and what you could call World War IV, where Russia and China are destroyed. The World War III, Daniel 11:41 war has begun. You probably don't think it has. Look at it, watch it, consider the many ships nation that are shooting down things, attacking Israel, considering the Arab nations around Israel trying to destroy Israel. It's a perfect match. But we haven't gone so far as the many ship superpower enters Israel. That will happen. And we haven't gone so far as Egypt gets involved and Egypt gets captured. That will happen. When these things happen, you can know that Daniel 11:40 through those 6 verses from 40 onwards is alive and well and happening just the way God wrote it 2,500 years ago. So no nation will reach world dominance by having a missile base on the surface of the moon. That's good news, right? God also shows in the book of Revelation that a small nation will rise after World War III and World War IV to dominate the remaining nations on planet Earth. This small nation will arise to dominate and kill. This is trumpet number 6. Look in the book of Revelation under trumpet number 6. To kill 1/3 of what's left of mankind. This domination occurs after World War III and after World War IV, where Russia is destroyed and China, right? And it's called the Great Tribulation period. The good news, we could use some good news by now, couldn't we? Right? The good news is no nation will control planet Earth by using a missile base on the moon.